Hello, chess fans. I have some very exciting news for me personally, as I just reached my highest rating ever on chess.com. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I did that, especially my last game. I just played against a grandmaster from Mongolia with the name Gombosuren. I'd never heard of him, but apparently he's from the same year as me, 1988. And well, he is a grandmaster. I'm just an international master. But it's a remarkable game, and I thought it's very exciting to show it to you. So here we go. If you do like to see more Blitz games, let me know, of course, in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's a very exciting game. I'm playing with black. My opponent starts with 1d4. I go knight f6, bishop f4. It's the London system. And I play b6 just to try to avoid some opening theory, sound development. As after the move c4, I put my bishop on b7. My opponent goes knight c3, and I play e6. So actually, via some sort of strange move order, we are back in, let's say, typical developing structures from the Nimzo Indian and the Queen's Indian, with the bishop coming to b4 and the bishop on b7. Well, there is e3. And here I go bishop b4. But here, of course, white has the option to play the move knight ge2. This may look strange, as usually the knight goes to f3. But after the move d5, my opponent goes a3. And well, I can take on c3. But after knight takes c3, I'm kind of helping my opponent. He is happy to recapture with the knight, claim the bishop pair, free development. So I felt, okay, I'm going back with the bishop to e7, maintaining the tension, and hopefully this knight on e2 proves to be misplaced, as it obstructs the bishop from f1. Well, pawn takes d5. I can take back in different ways. Maybe taking with a knight is the most logical move, but I took with the pawn. Now, interestingly, there are a lot of different ways of playing, but I didn't really expect the next move by my opponent. He played here the move g3. I don't like it too much, as the bishop on f4 doesn't have that many squares to go to. Personally, I was thinking the knight will go to g3, and then the bishop to d3 can castle. Looks like white has a very comfortable position. But let's have a look. g3, castling kingside, and now an even stranger move by my opponent, as he goes for the move h4. So he's building up some sort of pressure on the king side, ready to launch the h-pawn to h6, try to provoke some weaknesses on the king side against my king. And I felt, okay, I need to strike back in the center. That's the typical strategy. When your opponent attacks on the flank, you strike back in the center or on the other side of the board. So therefore the move c5, bishop to g2. And okay, I have to think about how I'm going to develop my knight. And I thought that knight a6 is quite a good move, as usually I can also go to c6, but in that case the bishop no longer has control over the pawn on d5. So I felt that the knight on a6 is not hindering the protection of the pawn on d5 by the bishop and the queen and the knight. So I thought, okay, this is looking quite interesting. Still, white can, of course, decide here to castle kingside and play in a more positional, solid way, but that's not something you would expect from a white player having developed in such a way. He continues here with the move h5, and now I play here the move h6. That is an interesting idea, as with this move, I'm stopping white from attacking any further. He goes g4. Remarkable shot, and it does invite me to take the pawn on g4. But do I want to take that pawn or not? Well, I felt I shouldn't do it, because if I take, the knight comes to g3. The queen hits the knight. If I save my knight by going back, he gets the knight to f5. And all of a sudden, with an open g-file, maybe the rook will come there, the queen can come over. I felt that's way too risky. So I'm not interested in taking pawns so that it opens up files towards my king. No way. I'm trying to strike back in the center, and I was very happy with my next move. Rather than taking the pawn, I played here knight to e4, which I think is a good decision, as now both with my knight and with my bishop, I'm preventing white from carrying out that pawn break g4, g5. And well, I do have a nice grip in the center. How I'm going to proceed, I'm not exactly sure, but it also depends on what white is going to do. And with that, I mean, in particular, how about the king on e1? Is he going to castle kingside? Well, then the attack is over and this king is also not safe. And so therefore white also has some decisions to make. And well, my opponent went for the move bishop takes e4, but after pawn takes e4, I feel that there are quite some holes on the king side, and the bishop is definitely missed here. Now, there's tension still between the pawns on d4 and c5, but taking on c5 is never really an attractive option, as it does invite the knight to come back into the game, and the d3 square is looming. So instead, my opponent decided here to advance the pawn in the center, d5. That's a very sharp move, as he is about to push the pawn, and it can count on the support of the bishop and the queen. Maybe the rook will get behind, and well, it looks razor sharp. But now, the next move is absolutely key. I played the move c4. I really think this is a very nice idea, with the main point being that my knight, again, will come back to c5, after which there are ideas to come to b3, but in particular the d3 square. That's where I want to be, so that I attack the king, and well, it will be harder for white to support that passed pawn on d5. It's important to realize that knight takes e4 can be met by bishop takes d5, and there are problems on this diagonal. The open position really favors my two bishops. And well, other options, if you ever push d6, I can put a bishop on f6. I will ignore the pawn, I will play around it, and I continue with the aforementioned plan of knight c5, knight d3. Anyway, that plan cannot really be stopped. My opponent went here for the move knight to g3. I played here knight c5, defending the pawn. So if you take, again, I can take, and the pawn on d5 will not be sufficiently defended. So that is one idea. My opponent played knight f5. So he's trying to generate counterplay. But I go knight d3 check, king f1. And okay, now I have my knight on d3. I'm very happy, of course. He cannot castle. His king is quite vulnerable. But I need to think how I'm further going to improve my position. And well, I felt bishop f6 is a very natural move, with the idea to trade off the bishop for the knight, after which I have possibilities to take the pawn on d5. So that looks pretty convincing. And if you do take on e4, well, there is bishop takes d5 again, with a very nice position, especially for my bishop on d5, hitting the knight and indirectly the rook. Well, knight takes e4 was not played. My opponent played knight d6, threatening the bishop on d7, but I can ignore it. I take on c3. If he does take back, I remove the threat, and I can take the pawn on d5. Everything is absolutely fine. So the key move here is knight takes b7, intermediate capture, attacking the queen, but I can just move the queen away, and that's a very solid and strong move. White takes back on c3. I take my opponent's knight on b7, and still look at the difference in strength between the two minor pieces. Knight on d3 is a beast. The bishop on f4 isn't doing much. What should white do? I mean, the pawn on d5 is even threatened to be taken. Well, white can continue with the attack with g5. That's interesting, because with a bit of imagination, you see a very powerful attack coming up here. So it's definitely not completely game over yet. Pawn takes g5, and now, rather than just taking back, because it allows me to take the pawn on d5, white continued here with the move h6. And the big question is white's attack really dangerous if he opens up the files? Well, for instance, I may have possibilities to keep the position closed with a move like g6, but I felt I can take the bishop on f4. That's an interesting idea. There are two moves I looked at. If you do play queen g4, threatening mate in 1, I can still defend with the move f5, attacking the queen, and the queen on b7 defends the pawn on g7. So that is a very important defensive resource. Instead, my opponent played pawn takes g7, and this does look very scary, because there are ideas here to go queen g4 and rook h8. Maybe I can take on g7 though, but after queen g4 I stopped calculating. Apparently maybe king f6 is possible, trying to run away, but the move I played in the game is better and even more spectacular, and I was really pleased to find it, as I went here for the move f3. I'm ignoring that rook on f8, which can be taken, but the main idea here is that with the move f3, I'm closing the king side. The queen is no longer able to reach that side of the board. So my opponent captures on f8 and I decide even to take here with the king. Look at this, I'm an exchange down, but again, that knight on d3 is a monster. It's putting pressure against the pawn on f2, but more importantly, the king, the white king, almost has no squares to go to. My opponent tried here this move, queen a4, hoping to offer the exchange of queens, for instance, but I can simply take the pawn on d5. Now after rook h8, I just go with my king to g7, and here my opponent realized that if he does take the rook on a8, of course black can take back and the game goes on, but a much stronger idea, which is what I had in mind, is to play the move queen g5 with mate on g2 unavoidable. This is a crushing idea thanks to the pawn on f3 supporting the square and the knight on d3 preventing the king from running away to the center. So after king g7, my opponent realized that his last move, rook h8, doesn't bring him anything. So he dropped back with the rook to h1, but now I play this move, rook to h8. That's a move I'm very happy with, as if he takes it, again, I do have plans to go with my queen to g5 very soon, so that should probably be really good. I have other options as well to take the rook, and well, that is just game over. Anyway, my opponent didn't take on h8, gave a check on g1, and I can just hide with my king on f6. All the possible checks have been covered. There's no good rook check. The queen also doesn't have a good check. Queen takes pawn was played with the idea to take the pawn on b6 and keep the black king busy. But with my next move, I'm sealing the deal. I played here queen e6, preventing white from capturing that pawn, and my queen is on its way to the king side. Queen c7 was white's last move in the game, as there was nothing white could do against the threat of queen h3, and it is checkmate. The only thing you can do is blocking with the rook, but after queen takes g2, it is officially checkmate. So with this victory, I, for the first time in my career, crossed the 2800 barrier on chess.com, and that is something I never really thought of. You know, usually when I play Blitz, it's between some of my lessons or between my recordings for the channel, or I'm playing in bed sometimes just on my phone, and I never really take it seriously. So now, having this nice streak, winning a lot of games in a row, it feels like now having 2800. Should I really try to play more Blitz? Should I play Title Tuesday? Should I play more frequently in general? Of course, it's not for big money, but it's more for like personal honor, and well, it can be motivating also for my over-the-board classical chess. And anyway, it's a good practice. It's like I'm training my openings, if I play serious openings, of course, and of course I'm also training my general tactical skills. So, you know, maybe I should really try to get a rating of 3000 or more. I don't know, then I would belong to the elite, but okay, I'm just international master. Maybe I'm not really made for it. Well, anyway, enough things to think about. Hopefully you enjoyed it and you have subscribed to the channel. And who knows, maybe I'll cover more exciting games on my channel to cross the 3000 rating barrier. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.